Good evening, dear subscribers of the YouTube channel POLITVISIA. It is my pleasure to announce the new guest on my YouTube. I would like to introduce Aaron Charpentier, who is an American writer, who is an artist, so basically who is a novelist. And because Aaron Charpentier has lived in Ukraine for about a year, so I think for Mr. Charpentier, the Russian invasion, Russian intervention into Ukraine really is a very sensitive topic, and I'm sure that we will have a very fruitful discussion with Mr. Charpentier regarding the situation which now we have in Ukraine and which is now under the scope of all Western medias. Good evening.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Katzin.
Mr. Charpentier, since you have lived in Ukraine for a while, for 1 year, as I told in the introduction, you understand the situation. So can you please share some thoughts about the reaction in the Western media among US citizens? Probably you hear how your acquaintances, friends, people with whom you mix, they react on Ukrainian-Russian conflict. Do you find any difference in the attitude towards Russia before Russia launched its invasion and afterwards?
Yes, I think first of all, I think that there's a really positive, positive view towards Ukrainians, and I think that regular Americans, I think even a lot of politicians, experts, see what's happening for what it is, a Russian invasion, and I think that obviously they see Ukraine as a victim, but they definitely don't see Ukraine as a helpless victim, because Ukraine's been fighting back courageously, and I think that the world's surprised that Ukraine was able to, be quite frank with you, that Ukraine was able to make it for as long as it did, and so I see a lot of there's prospects in that area too. I think that there's a good chance that Kiev might not fall, but even if it does, I don't think that the Ukrainian people will give up that easily. I think you'll see a lot of guerrilla attacks, and I don't think that the Ukrainians will ever surrender.
Well, I'm sure that Ukraine won't surrender. Actually, already 4 days have passed since the beginning of the attack, and we see that Ukraine gained spirit, people gained spirit. So now Ukrainian resistance is very high, and we put really great pressure upon Russian forces. Nevertheless, Mr. Charpentier, in Ukraine, we usually have the discussion which basically is directed towards integration into European Union and NATO, and these are our main goals: to join European Union and North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And we have done a lot to join these organizations, so we made a huge advancements in our law. We adjusted our law to the Western standards. And now, after Russia launched a severe attack on Ukraine, I think the last argument fell when Western world was afraid that Russia can launch a war after Ukraine joined NATO. Russia launched already a war before Ukraine joined NATO, and if Ukraine will win in this war, then it gives, I think, another impetus towards accepting Ukraine into NATO. But what do you think? If we're talking about, let's say, political destinies, I understand that many Americans, Europeans, they consider Ukrainians as a very loyal people, as very, let's say, open-hearted people. But these arguments deal more with cultural reasons. But what's about the political component? What do you think? Do Americans, Europeans, as we say in Ukraine, the West, politically consider Ukraine as a state worth to join NATO and European Union, as a state which politically actually adhere to the standards and to the way of thinking, way of life of member states of European Union and NATO?
I think Ukraine is a traditional country and society, no doubt, but I think Ukrainians are also very good at adapting to change, and I also think that Ukrainians are they share a lot of the values that the West shares, and and they are extremely loyal. I've rarely seen such loyal people. I lived in a lot of different countries, and when you make friends with a Ukrainian, it's a very serious thing, and I don't think that Ukraine will be able to join NATO anytime soon. I think that's off the table. Of course, I could be wrong, but and I hope that I'm wrong. But I just don't see it. I think in the future, like the distant future, I think it's possible.
Mr. Charpentier, in Ukraine, we now see how people in different states, including the United States, they go out to the street and they protest against the Russian invasion. And obviously, there are many Ukrainians who live abroad, including in the United States. And obviously, for many Ukrainians, this is a very serious question because they still have relatives in Ukraine, they still have roots in Ukraine. What's about citizens of the United States? What is their attitude? Are they prepared actually to protest against Russian invasion? Do they consider Ukrainian problem as their own problem? I understand that for each family in the United States has its own financial problems, financial reasons, life paces, etc. But still, this is a very serious situation on Ukrainian land. And do citizens of the United States consider this as a serious problem, and are they ready to protest against Russian invasion?
Well, I think first of all that it's not a Ukrainian. The Russian invasion isn't a Ukrainian problem. It's an international issue, and there's really no telling how serious this war could escalate, especially if Russia attacked a NATO country, right? Then our military would have to intervene, right? And that would just change the whole scale of everything. And I think with Putin, he's extremely unpredictable. And I think no one, even you, an expert in your field, would have ever predicted that Putin would do such a thing, because it's a very irrational thing, and it's just a very and it's just very difficult for rational people to really understand an irrational person of Putin's magnitude, and so I think that America needs to be very careful around around that issue. You know, I think that if we don't deal with this issue in a really serious, if we don't take it seriously, and I think that if Biden doesn't take a really a very assertive stance, then it will show weakness on our part, and I think that Putin, that the situation could escalate. I think Putin is the kind of person that takes advantage of any sign of weakness.
If we look behind and we'll trace the history of the past 20 years, we will see that many times actually Western world made commitments towards Russia and made different, let's say, different steps towards Russian position. And actually, what we noticed in Ukraine, that simply Western world till the, let's say, last Friday didn't want to burn the bridges with Russia. And actually they tried to calm down Mr. Putin, who turned out to be an aggressor, who turned out to be a totalitarian leader after 22 years since he hold the power in Russia. I understand that history can't be analyzed retrospectively, and you can't, let's say, judge the positions of Western politicians from today's perspective. But still, what do you think? Was it a wise position of the Western political elite to make so many commitments to Mr. Putin and to turn the blind eye on his behavior, which he showed up numerous times?
Well, I think, and you pretty much said this, but I think that the world could have never imagined, the experts could have never imagined Putin doing something like this. It's just really unbelievable, and it's just shocking, and I still can't believe it's happening. I just remember when I lived in Odessa, Ukraine for about a year and 4 months, I believe it was. And, I was in Kiev for the capital for a little while. And, it was just like being in any American city. It was just peaceful. It was, Ukrainian people are peaceful people. And, I felt more safe in Odessa than I would a lot of American cities. But yeah, things have changed, obviously. And I think that no one could have ever, imagined, Putin would do what he's doing today. So I think that obviously in the future, the experts will take Western experts will take him more seriously. But I think that, I just think that no one saw this coming.
Mr. Charpentier, in European Union, more or less, people know that Ukraine differs a lot from Russia, and they distinct Ukraine from Russia. Even before annexation of Crimea, which was made by Russia, Europeans they knew the difference between Ukraine and Russia. But what is about the United States? Do ordinary Americans know the difference between our two countries, between Ukraine and Russia, or still? For Americans, ordinary Americans, not a political elite, I would like to underline, for ordinary Americans, this area is a post-Soviet area.
Could you repeat that again? Could you? be more specific?
Do you, if we talk, let's say, about an attitude of Americans, yeah, and do they differ between Ukraine and Russia, and do they, let's say, are they aware about Ukrainian existence?
Okay. No,
or they still consider, let's say, these states as a post-Soviet area.
Yeah, I understood the first part. I just, you know, wanted you to be more specific about the second, about, you know, saying that calling calling it a post-Soviet era. I think that
area,
not
era, area.
Excuse me. Okay.
Area.
I think a lot of Americans, especially now, know a lot more about Ukraine because they don't, you know, Americans really don't have a lot of knowledge about Ukraine, and I think some ordinary Americans even still thought that Ukraine was part of Russia. So, but not all. I think, you know, and it's hard to speak for all ordinary Americans. You know, I haven't done a, you know, a poll or anything, so.
Mr. Charpentier, Ukraine now is in a very difficult situation, and I would like to again express my sincere gratitude towards President Biden, his administration, bipartisan support which Ukraine received on a stable basis. And actually, Mr. Biden was the first politician who raised his concerns about the situation on the Ukrainian-Russian border, signaling that Putin is going to fight Ukraine and is going to launch a big war. So thank you very much for your position as a country in this conflict. I would like to ask you regarding the perception of the role of the United States in the world. In the 19th century, there was a doctrine of actually American isolation, when the United States, this was a Monroe doctrine, when the United States simply dealt with internal problems. But since the First World War, our United States emerged on, let's say, European map as a political force. We remember the doctrine of Vilnius, his provisions after the First World War, which determined how the world should develop at that time. We remember the role of the United States during the Second World War, etc. And even the role of the United States during the Cold War, when there was a Iron Curtain and the Soviet Union was called by President Reagan the evil empire. But obviously it is a great burden to be a world superpower, and it is a great burden for United States to protect the democracy and rule of law elsewhere. So, and obviously, this role of the United States always contested by politicians during elections. But what is funny, no matter Democratic representative or Republican representative win elections in the United States continue because there is a stable, predictable foreign affairs strategy. But what is about people? Do American people accept this unique role United States have on a geopolitical map?
I think so. I think experts and I think ordinary people, you know, care about a lot of things that are going on in the world, and I think you know, they know that our country is powerful enough to address a lot of those issues, And I think that the American psyche is definitely, developed since the, Monroe Doctrine. And, first started, But no, I think Americans, and I can, say this for myself too, that they have kind of taken on the role, as the international police, for lack of a better term.
Mr. Charpentier, I would like to ask you the last question, since I'm a journalist and I'm an anchor on the Odessa local TV station, media informative station. Also, I'm, let's say, an anchor on this YouTube channel. I would like to ask you about the media, because media is very important. Actually, there is no direct democracy in the modern world. Obviously, there are many institutions of civil society which help to execute the democracy. And media is very important. I know that in the United States, people, they're ready to finance media, and they're ready to pay for the subscriptions. They're ready to pay some taxes to finances, let's say, public broadcasting stations, CNN, etc., etc. In Ukraine, unfortunately, still the biggest media outlets, they belong to the tycoons, because it is very expensive to finance medias and covers expenditures of medias. What is actually the attitude of American people towards media? What is an attitude of American people towards, let's say, civil society? Because civil society is a very important issue. It's let's say, a moral position, a moral standpoint for each person to say that, yes, I have not only my work duties, my family duties, but also my, let's say, community duties. So is this feeling strong in the United States? And what can you recommend to Ukraine, how to raise such, let's say, responsibility among Ukrainian society, how to build civil society in Ukraine, how to, let's say, motivate people to finance medias, to finance NGOs, to enrich the non-governmental sector, as we say?
I don't know. I couldn't really answer to that, to be honest with you. But you talked about how you asked about Americans, being involved in their communities, and I think that Americans really like to have their own voice and their own opinions, and and I think that now Ukrainians will be more, I think, active, and really want to, have their voice heard too, especially with what with everything that's going on, and they know the importance of really getting their voice out there, and not just as individuals, but Ukraine as a nation. I think that Ukraine needs to really try to brand itself more, in the international world, so that people know more about Ukraine, and because it is Ukrainian people are very intelligent, very strong, very determined, and as the whole world sees now, very courageous. And I think that I think that Ukrainians really need to have more of a voice as a people.
Mr. Charpentier, thank you very much for this interview. I really appreciate your time and the effort and your dedication during this interview. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to tell you that Ukrainian army, with the support of our Western allies, continue to beat our Russian army, continue to resist, and all attacks which Russia tried to perform during these 4 days, they actually were effectively stopped by Ukrainian army, Ukrainian National Guard, and I hope that soon this conflict will be solved, because this conflict actually prevent Ukraine from the economical development, but from other point of view, this is a conflict which will help to forge Ukrainian might, to make Ukraine more united, to make Ukraine more committed, and to make Ukraine strong political actor on European map and reliable partner for United States and European Union. Thank you very much. My dear channel, would like to remind that here you can get access to my interviews, which done in Russian or English. So please, my subscribers, to my YouTube channel. There will be more very interesting interviews, and I'm sure that with Mr. Charpentier we will continue our dialogue. Thank you very much, Mr. Charpentier.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Cartier.